Welcome back to the Not Yet Adults podcast. This is, of course, a podcast starring Collin Geffrey and myself, Eric Zayas, as we navigate the long and treacherous road of adulthood and the, might I say, spooky road.
Ooh, some might say it's a scary journey towards adulthood.
Some might say it's a little bit frightening.
Some might say this is the Halloween episode. That was less subtle. Sorry.
That was a little bit on the nose. How are you doing, Collin?
A little direct. I'm doing well, Eric. It's an interesting time of year. We're at the very beginning of holiday season, and so
God help us.
God help us, man. This week we got Halloween, and then before we know it, Thanksgiving will be here, and then if you're a capitalist, Black Friday, and then Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever.
Or all three.
Celebrate all those, yeah. So, does anyone actually celebrate all three? Is that a real thing?
I'm sure there's some people that do it that aren't even prescribed to the religions or cultures associated and are just like, I just like all the holidays and just want to...
Just looking for an excuse to have fun?
Yeah,
just hang out?
Just want all the presents I can get, all the fun times I can have, and all the excuses I can have to take time off work.
There you go. You started like all the excuses I have to take off, and I was wondering where that sentence was going. And I was like, okay, off work, got it. I'm with you. So we're doing Halloween today, Eric. That's our thing.
Boo,
that's our big old
spooky.
topic. Boo.
You scared? That's you.
You did scare me, but it was for a different reason than the boo. It was just because Discord's call quality the latency's so bad that I was just terrified. But yeah, so the Halloween's. I don't want to say it's the redheaded stepchild of all the other holidays, but it's sort of like...
some people might disagree with you. Some people might say it's the golden boy of holidays.
Is it? Do you really? To me, it's always like almost like you're really close to being a full holiday. That's kind of how I see it, but maybe not. Maybe that's just my own jaded personality. I'm just saying I feel like Thanksgiving and Christmas are like the heavy hitters, and Halloween's like the best player in the minor leagues.
I don't know. I feel like Halloween's, like Thanksgiving and Christmas are just more expensive and require more planning because they're both holidays that require you to like, or at least for many people, many families require people to like, families to come together, which requires when you're older, sometimes plane tickets and sometimes a lot of scheduling and stuff, taking time off work. Whereas Halloween, you don't need to necessarily be with a family. You don't even... you can just get candy or a costume and have a good old spooky time.
Good old spooky time. So when we're kids, Eric, because we often do that on this podcast, we sort of look back and then look forward. When we're kids, there's nothing more exciting than the night of the year that we get to run around a bunch of strangers' houses and get free candy. And I feel like even when you're an adult, that's probably one of the first thing that comes to mind. When you think about Halloween is trick-or-treating. What was your approach to trick-or-treating as a kid? Let's just start there. Were you just like you had the route mapped out and you had the times and you had your crew and you were going to go out and get as much candy as possible, or did you do it kind of reluctantly, or what was sort of your methodology?
Absolutely not, Colin. I feel like our parents, this generation we grew up in was post 80s, and 80s was when like horrible stuff started to happen. Obviously horrible stuff has always been happening, but I feel like 70s and 80s were the times when the horrible stuff that happened at night and to children, unfortunately, became more publicized in the news and stuff. So my parents were very cautious of me going out at night, and so anytime I would go trick-or-treating, they had to be with me, obviously. And we'd only go to and when I used to live in Spanaway, I lived in a cul-de-sac, and for Halloween we don't really go around the cul-de-sac and then we're done. So Halloween only took like half an hour, if that. I don't know. It was fun because you were dressed up and there were a lot of other kids excited and dressed up and we were getting candy, but also the trick-or-treating part of it was a small part of the Halloween experience, whereas when you come home with the candy and you're watching scary movies and staying up late, that to me was more like Halloween. And of course, like Disney Channel originals like Halloween Town and whatnot, and other scary movies on like that were like family friendly scary movies. There were a lot of those, and that was a good time.
It's interesting because my dad has always been the kind of person who really likes going out and doing things. He's always very encouraging of like just go out and do something, just run around, go for a hike, go to rob a bank, whatever gets you off the couch and off the TV. That's always kind of been his motto. And so for as long as I can remember, he has always liked taking us trick or treating more than any, and by any I mean myself or my siblings, any of us ever actually liked trick or treating ourselves. And so it was very much like mom and dad really want to do this, and so we're kind of here. And like my dad, I mentioned this to the pre-show, but like my dad trick or treated through college, which is like
Oh God,
a little too old. Um,
perhaps. But
I mean, yeah, it's a matter of debate, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But
hmm
it was always very much like your parents are looking forward to it, and so I'm kind of like, well, I'm just kind of along for the ride, I guess. I always thought it was weird. I remember being like 5 or 6 and thinking this is very strange. I don't know who these strangers are. I have no idea what they're giving me. This all just seems very odd. Um, so as long as I can remember, I always thought trick or treating was kind of weird. I was probably, I'm gonna say about 9 when I stopped trick or treating, which I feel like is probably a little earlier than most people. But yeah, I never really cared for trick or treating much. I always thought it was a little bit weird. I never went with friends. It was always a family thing. And obviously, when we moved to Spokane, it was like 30 degrees out when we were out trick or treating, and I'm like, this is not fun. And unless your costume accommodates like 2 winter coats over each other, then it's like I don't want to do this. But how old were you? Do you think when you gave up on the whole trick or treating thing?
Definitely a few years later than I should have, because there was a time, there was like a phase trick or treating when I was just like wanted to go out and get free candy, but didn't want to put work into getting costumes. So every year I would go through my closet and find the same mask I would just keep wearing, and that was the whole costume. I'd wear a Scream mask, so it's that like the ghost from Scream, and I'd put like a black hoodie over it, and that was my costume. And it was just lazy and lame, and I'd get like a pillowcase and go out and get candy. Probably a few years later than I should have. There was, I think, a point when my parents were just like, "Do you really even want to go trick or treating this year?" And I was just like, "Nah." And I didn't really want to. I was just kind of like, "It's Halloween. You're supposed to trick or treat," and I guess I'd wanted to, only because I felt that's what you're supposed to do. But then like I realized like, oh, I'm too old, and like I'm not even trying with the costume. So what? I can just go out and get candy. I don't really need to go out.
Well, and then like you get a little bit older, and like obviously everyone's different, but for me personally, I've cut down a lot on the sugar I've had in the last year, and like I just hate the feeling that eating a bunch of candy and cookies and crap gives me. I'm just like, ugh, it sounded good, and it was never worth it, not once. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people resonate with that of kind of getting to that age where you're doing it, and this I think goes beyond just trick or treating. I think this is true of a lot of things, but you're doing it sort of because you've done it in the past, and you don't necessarily have that gut check moment of maybe I shouldn't do this anymore as early as you should. And every now and again, it takes a parent or a friend or just a passing thought or something to realize, hey, maybe I don't have to do this. Maybe this has kind of run its course.
There's definitely a cutoff age when, like, if you keep trick or treating, it starts to get kind of weird and awkward, and people kind of give you weird looks and are like, "You're too old to be doing this." And when do you think that is?
Oh, geez. I mean, like I said, for me it was earlier, so I'm just gonna kind of give the benefit of the doubt. But I'd say probably 13. I'm gonna say like right around there, like just before you're really getting deep into puberty. Once you look like you're high school age, I think that's probably too much.
And once puberty comes into play, things start to, yeah, everything goes downhill from there. I was actually gonna say 15 because that's like right when you start high school. But then again, like honestly, 13 is probably more, because 13 is like junior high, and honestly, like maybe even younger than like 12 or so is when you should stop. Like once you start junior high, then it's like you should be having different interests during Halloween, like seeing scary movies or hanging out with friends, because like Halloween or trick or treating rather, to me is such a like child specific thing. And when you're like seen more as a preteen or as a teenager and less of a child, that it's like, oh, if you're doing childish things, if you're with if you're with your parents, it's weird because it's like you're a teenager hanging out with your parents at night. It's like, and if you're not with your parents, then it's also weird because you're just like running around to different houses at night asking for candy when amongst other kids with their parents. It's just it's just awkward.
Well, with respect, Eric, I don't think we should trick or treat shame our older listeners. If they want to go trick or treat, that's entirely their right. They can do that. That said, you need to understand the thoughts that people opening the door are going to have if you are or look like you are above a certain age.
You know what, Colin? You're absolutely right. I shouldn't be trick or treating shame, but people who trick or treat outside of the appropriate age just need to be aware that they're going to get some stares, and it's not going to be like they're not getting strange scares necessarily because of their spooky costume.
That's absolutely true. I remember I was probably, let's say 15. I had a group of friends, these three girls that
Ooh.
they were like, yeah, it wasn't like that, but they were like homeschooled kids, so we didn't get to hang out that much because I was a public school kid. But like every now and again, we'd go do stuff together, and like they surprised me and showed up at my house and like took me trick or treating, even though like none of us really wanted to trick or treat. It was just like a fun thing to go do together, and like we went out and like everyone opening the doors kind of gave us like that look. And like they were a couple years older than me, and I felt, because I hadn't been trick or treating since I was like 9, I felt like I was way too old to be there, and so just like, oh, this is not good. This is not fun. But yeah, I mean, you hit that moment in your life where you're just like, this is behind me now. This trick or treating thing is done, and then you eventually grow up and you have kids, and you get to vicariously relive it, and that's how that goes. But Eric, you touched on one thing in sort of your shaming of people out there who want to go trick or treating. You mentioned sort of once you get a little bit older, one of the other things you can do is sort of go to scary movies, and I feel like that is, for lack of a better term, like that's socially acceptable regardless of what age you are. It's like scary movies. You as an adult can go to scary movies, and that's totally fine, and like no one cares about that. But like the scary movies that we saw when we were a kid that scared us and the scary movies that we go see now with friends or whatever, I feel like has probably shifted quite a bit. So like what as a kid, what memories do you have seeing scary movies that either you weren't supposed to, or maybe your parents showed you a little too early, or what do you kind of have in that ball field?
I was very anti scary movies as a kid. Like I vividly remember a time when I was very young, probably like 5, 6, 7, and my sister and I were hanging out on the same bed at night, watching like channel flipping basically, and we flipped the channel to one where like and my sister and I are pretty similar age. She's a few years older than me. We switched the channels to Chucky, and at first we didn't know it was Chucky. It was just like this movie with this teenager, and then the camera cuts to an image of Chucky and what I assume is the bride of Chucky, and they're both standing behind the glass of this like one of those claw games. They're inside the claw game, and it just the image of a Chucky and the bride of Chucky, we just started screaming, like bloody murder screaming, and our parents ran to the bedroom because they're like, oh, our children are dying, like something's happening, someone's murdering our children. Probably they were probably really scared, and it was just we both put the covers over our head and we're screaming and like, turn it off, make it go away. And they thought it was, to this day they still bring that up.
Okay, so I'm gonna make fun of you a little bit because one, Bride of Chucky is arguably the least scary movie in the Chucky
Well,
franchise.
we were very young. We literally saw probably like a minute of it, even less than that, and like we didn't have any sense of the plot because we were channel flipping. But we just saw the image of Chucky and we're like, nope, oh, that's Chucky. That means scary.
Well, and I just did a Google search, and I'll take back a little bit of the shade I was throwing at you. I thought Bride of Chucky was like mid-late 2000s. I'm thinking of Steed of Chucky. Is the one I'm thinking of, where they have a kid. That's a little bit later. And I was like, you were not at an age, because you're older than me. And I was like, so you were not at an age in the late 2000s where you should have been scared of Bride of Chucky. But I was thinking of a different movie, so you're fine. Bride of Chucky was 1998. So that's understandable. You're good.
Oh, then I must have been 4. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, Chucky was the same one for me, but it was Child's Play 2. I remember being about 4, and my mom has always loved horror movies for as long as she can remember. That was always her thing in high school and college. She would go see horror movies with friends, and or even by herself a lot of the time. She loves like Frankenstein, Halloween, and Hellraiser, and all those. And showed me Child's Play 2 because it was on TV, and I was probably 4. And so she called me in there, and I watched like 5 minutes, and I really tried to play it cool. And then I remember this vividly. I went back into the family room to keep playing Spider-Man on the Xbox, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And from then on, that has been far and away, I think, the scariest movie I remember. But honestly, I to this day say that Child's Play 2 is probably the scariest movie to me. I think you could have ended the Chucky franchise after Child's Play 2 and been totally fine. But I mean, the brilliance of Child's Play 1 is that came out at a time where no one was really sure of what the doll was going to look like, moving and talking and all of that. And that was sort of this level of suspense and sort of build up that the movie had is, if you remember, you don't see Chucky move, like actually move on screen till I'm gonna say probably 2/3, if not 3/4 of the way through the movie. Like it's a lot of rising tension and build up. And that's what's so brilliant about that movie is they don't, blow their load immediately. They really take their time. And I really like that about that movie a lot. But Child's Play 2, I think, is just more. It's a sequel. But yeah, that movie messed me up as a little kid, man. I don't even remember what scene I saw when I was just a little kid, but that never quite stopped thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I made it an effort. I made it a personal goal myself as an adult to go back and watch the Child's Play trilogy. And God, it is not like I seeing it as an adult. I'm like, how was I scared of this as a child? But of course, it's when you're a child, like I hadn't had as much experience with like scary imagery or anything. But as an adult, it's like kind of a joke how like unafraid I am of that. It's definitely creepy. Like when when Chucky starts talking, like the voice actor for him is so like But other than that, I'm just like, oh, this is just goofy.
I always forget it's a trilogy. I always just kind of, I guess, in my brain have blocked out every Chucky movie after Child's Play 2. Even though I think it was Cult of Chucky was the one that came to Netflix a year or two ago, and I thought that was better for the most part. But it was weird. There's just some franchises just need to end, man. It's crazy. But yeah. So that was them as kids. That was sort of our relationship with horror movies when we were kids. What's your relationship with it now? Do you like going and seeing them in the theater? Do you occasionally flip them on when they're on TV? How much of a horror fan are you?
Honestly, now I'm not really much of a horror fan as an adult, but only because I feel like most horror movies are kind of like cheap. Like I think horror. I heard somewhere that horror is like the cheapest genre to make. As such, you see so many horror movies now because they're pretty easy to make and like to get out quickly. So a lot of the horror movies are bad. I do like the ones that try to be unique and do like things that are kind of they change up the form a little bit. Like I hate the formulaic horror movies, and you see so many of those nowadays. But I've been recently this holiday season with my sister have been watching some of the OG horror movies, like the first Halloween movie, the first Friday the 13th movie. I watched Carrie again, which is a classic, the original Carrie. So I've been enjoying those. But I mean, like some horror movies I really like recently are. Saw the Babadook not too long ago, and that's a really good one. My relationship with horror movies now is I just see them as another form of entertainment, whereas as a kid I just saw them as a experience to be traumatized by. But what about you, Colin?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I feel like as a kid, you like you said, you're just traumatized by it, and then once you get kind of middle school, high school age, it's sort of you're trying to be traumatized by it, if that makes any sense. Like you're going into it with friends, like trying to get scared and trying to get freaked out. And because my family is all so into horror movies, I feel like I was just desensitized to it at a young age. And so by the time I was like 13 or 14, I was just watching any horror movie that came out, and I was just like, I'm not enjoying this. This is just very repetitive, like you mentioned, very boring, not particularly scary. And that's kind of where I sit with horror movies now. I don't remember the last time I saw a horror movie that I really enjoyed. Um, Honestly, Child's Play 2 is the one that comes to mind. I liked, not a popular opinion, but I went and saw at PLU by myself the Blair Witch remake. And I actually enjoyed it just because I love found footage. I think it's a really fascinating way to tell a story. Um, but that movie did not do well. People general consensus is that movie was not good. But I actually enjoyed that movie, and maybe it was just because I just went out and like made an event of it and went and saw it. But I liked the new Blair Witch movie.
I came so close to watching that. I saw the trailer for it and I thought the premise was so interesting because that or so interesting that it made me want to watch the original because I'd never seen the Blair Witch Project, so I watched the original and was just like, oh, this is the Blair Witch Project, and I was kind of surprised and slightly disappointed, but later on, the more I thought about it, impressed that nothing really like the things people reference when they talk about Blair Witch Project, none of that really happens till like the last minute of the movie, like literally the last couple minutes. Most of the movie is really just like three friends that get lost in the wood, and as time goes on, they realize more and more how screwed they are, and that's really the horror, excuse me, the horror movie part of it. But then like I saw that and I was like, oh, I watched the Blair Witch Project finally. This is a great movie. And then I just kind of dilly dallied and never got around to watching the remake. And then I watched reviews of the remake after it came out, and people were just like, yeah, this is a bad remake. And I was like, oh well, I guess I won't watch it. I still kind of want to.
Well, and horror movies traditionally don't score very high as far as reviews go. Just because they're kind of campy by nature. I will say, and this might sound kind of pretentious or dumb for me to say because I didn't grow up in that time. But my understanding is the original Blair Witch was as special as it was because of the way it was marketed, and that was that it was real. And like they didn't market it as a movie, they marketed it as basically this is a real thing that happened. And the actors were like they put like missing person reports out for actors like months ahead of the release. It was so just outside the box and clever about the marketing. ARG is what they call it, augmented reality game.
And it's the kind of thing you can only do once, really, because like, I mean, I guess like Paranormal Activity was almost an example of them that being successful again. Like, oh, people watch this, oh, this is real, but really, like, you see the Paramount Pictures thing, and you're like, oh, this isn't real. But because like the original Blair Witch Project was one of the first movies with found footage, and the first and one of the most ballsy and unique marketing strategies. The ARG, like, have you seen these people? And the three pictures are the three actors in the movie.
And it hit at a time. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but original Blair Witch, like late '90s, right? I'll fact check it here. Hang on, but the point I'm trying to make is '99, yeah. But it hit at a time where the internet was just popping onto the scene and getting big, and so in a pre-Google, pre-Wikipedia world, like it was just perfect. And if these Google things are correct, apparently it was shot on a budget of $60,000, which is nothing for movies. So that's crazy. Anyways, we're getting kind of long in the tooth, Eric, which is fine. I mean, it's a holiday episode. This is like a very special episode of Not Yet Adults because Halloween only comes around once a year. But I kind of wanted to end with, as we get older, we trick or treat a little bit less. Maybe we watch scary movies a little bit less or a little bit more, depending on the person. But one thing that definitely happens more as you get older is you go to Halloween parties. And this is something that maybe your friends throwing, your family's putting on, or whatever. And I was just curious, do you have any real Halloween party stories? Maybe your first one or one that sticks out in recent memory?
There was like a short window of time where I felt like Halloween parties were great, and they can still be good again, if you get with the right friends. But since a lot of our friends are, or a lot of the people we know in our lives are having kids, like the Halloween parties just aren't as hashtag lit as they used to be. Because if you bring a kid to a party, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we can't, not that I do this very often, but I can't get super drunk and like party as much as I might want to because there's a kid. Now I have to kind of be like tone it down. Not to say like people bringing their kids to parties are party poopers, but
Well, I might be saying that. That might be what I'm saying because like that's pretty crappy. If you have a party with a bunch of young 20-something adults and one of them brings their kid, like I understand. You have a kid, you need to take care of your kid. That's great. That's you being a good parent. But you bringing that kid to a party, I unless it is a kids party, I feel like you're kind of harsh in the mellow. I feel like that's not okay personally.
But yeah, I just have two distinct kind of memories of like having a Halloween party at a friend's house. It was also like one of the first parties at a new house he was at, and I told my friend, I don't have a costume. I'm just gonna come with myself, and I came with a backpack, and I told him the backpack was just my overnight bag because I planned on drinking alcohol, and because I'm responsible, I wasn't gonna drive home. I was gonna crash, drink and party responsibly, people. And so I came with the backpack. I was like, "May I use your restroom?" Went to the restroom
And just got trashed on Jack Daniels in the bathroom. No.
just got trashed and then just like left. No, I'm just kidding. No, I just I had an alien morph suit and a like a toy sci-fi gun, and I put the alien morph suit on and my shoes over the foot part, and I had the gun, and then I left the bathroom, and my friend was in another room, and all of our other friends who were in the living area just started cracking up.
And just for context, is anyone else in costume at this party?
I think like one or two other people, and there was like the easy like costumes, like I put on one thing and I'm this, I put on an eye patch, I'm a pirate, that kind of costume. And then I kind of snuck into. I had another friend operate my phone because the hand part of the morph suit doesn't interact with touchscreen. So I was like, put on the X-Files thing, and then as I snuck into the room where my friend who was hosting the party was at, the X-Files thing just started playing, and he turns around, and I'm just like crawling on the ground, being all weird, like holding the gun all weird and pressing the trigger, and it makes like a weird sound effect with lights spinning. But yeah, he just turns around, he's like, "What?" And then when he realized it was me, because I was making weird alien noises and it wasn't talking, and because it covers my whole body and my face, he couldn't tell it was me at first. He's like, "What is this? Who is this?" And then he realized it was me. He started cracking up, and it was a jolly good time. But yeah, but contrast that with other parties where like I go and there's a kid and everyone's like playing on their phones, like doing different Snapchat filters, and it's just like, what is this even a party? Everyone's on their phone. Like, what's going on? Those are the two kind of experiences I had with the parties now. But what about you, Collin? What are your like kind of lit Halloween party experiences?
#lit. I don't have many #lit stories at all, Eric, but the only Halloween party story that comes to mind is I was in 7th grade, and I liked this girl, and yeah, I know, the classic middle school story. But I had a few friends that liked a bunch of girls in this girl's group of friends, and they invited us all over for a Halloween party. They had like this giant shop in their backyard because freaking everyone in Spokane lives on an acre with a shop in the back. I don't know why. And they turned it into like this Halloween place, and so there were like arcade cabinets and fog and spider webs and decorations and all that.
That sounds cool.
I mean, it was cool if you're 13. Like it was cool at the time. And so we all went there, and that's where I like found out that the girl liked me for the first time. And it was like a very like dramatic thing, but
it's a Halloween miracle.
Oh, I know, right? But it got to the point where we were all like playing capture the flag, and clearly it was boys against girls, and clearly it was like a bunch of people on the guy team liked a bunch of people on the girl team. It was just middle school stuff, man. Whatever you think of as middle school angsty stuff, that's what it was.
Was there Linkin Park playing?
I don't think there was Linkin Park playing, but I don't know if I could have told you if there was, because I didn't really start paying attention to who sung what songs till mid-high school. If it wasn't Green Day, I didn't care. That was pretty much my motto. Yeah, I don't really have a beginning, middle, and ending to that story. It was just we were playing capture the flag. There was this game where there was like grapes in this bowl of Jello, and people had to dip their face in and grab the grapes. And I remember just having this thought of like, this is disgusting. This is just very gross, and I don't like this. And then we went home, and my buddy crashed to my place, and we played Pokemon for like 12 hours. So it was great, I guess. I don't know, man. I don't have many #lit stories, but yeah, that's what I got, man. That's the Halloween party. I think I've been to a Halloween party since then, but I don't really remember it. I think it was like I was like 16, and it was like a bunch of 16-year-olds, and they were trying to like summon a genie or a demon or like some sort of black magic thing. They're just teenagers being dumb. And that's when I was like,
classic summoning a genie story.
Classic black magic, man. And that's when I was just like, I just feel this is a little childish. I feel like I should probably be researching my 401k or something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I assume I'll go to another Halloween party someday. I haven't been to a Halloween party as a college student or college grad, so I'm not really sure what that looks like. But maybe someday, man. Maybe we'll throw our own Halloween party next year, and we'll only invite the really cool kids. And by cool kids, I mean cool adults, because don't bring kids to a party. That's dumb. Don't do that.
Yeah, I don't have any kids I can even invite. I don't know what kids you're hanging out with, Colin.
But it'd be weird if you, a 23, 24-year-old man, knew like a bunch of kids to invite to his party. That's a little odd.
Well, on that note, I think it'd be time to end this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. Well, folks, what is your favorite Halloween story, or just a scary story in general? Maybe you have a out of body experience you want to share with us or something. Let us know in the SoundCloud or YouTube comments. And remember, this is the Not Yet Adults podcast. Every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m., we bring a new podcast to your ears on all sorts of services, such as YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and all other podcast services, except for the ones we're not on, but we're on most of them. So we are also across the social media sphere on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Not Yet Adults, as well as on our own subreddit r/Not Yet Adults, which you should definitely check out if you have the time. If you have even more time and you want to do us a solid, head on over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes if you're on iOS and leave us a rating and review there. It only takes a couple minutes out of your day, but it is an enormous help to us, and it makes sure that more people get to listen to the podcast every week, which we would really appreciate, because while the podcast has been growing recently, we put a lot of work into this, and we'd love to see even more growth. So whatever you can do, we would be forever in your debt. We'll be back Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time talking about something new, and we hope you all have a very, very happy Halloween. So thanks for listening. And until next time, this has been Not Yet Adults.
Boo, spooky. That scared you?